Alrighty, welcome everybody. For those of you who are a little bit wondering, what is this? Hi, I'm Jeremy Vyska, MVP in Business Central, and with me today is AJ Ansari, also an MVP in Business Central and knowledgeable in a host of small other things as well, for sure. And we had the pleasure of meeting for the first time in person this year, and at our most recent convention together, which would be the Directions EMEA event, he had the opportunity to meet my lovely assistant, Venus, and we got on the conversation of, you have an assistant, that seems a little unusual in this industry. What's the story with that? And so we were starting to have a conversation, but conferences are conferences. So we were busy people. And so we decided to schedule it for later. But rather than have it just be a Teams chat, we decided, you know what? Let's have AJ, myself, and also Venus. Hello. Join in as a group conference and let everyone else be a fly on the wall in that conversation. So welcome, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you, Jeremy. Hi, Jeremy. Hi, Venus. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. How's it going? How's the other part of the world?
Warm, but about to get a little bit colder, although I think you have no sympathy for what I consider warm and cold.
-9 outside.
Yep, I think in Fahrenheit we're about 60 some degrees, probably about, that's 15, 16 degrees centigrade, I think. And then next week it's going to get a little bit colder, and colder for us is going to be about 10 degrees. So yeah, Celsius.
That's summer in Sweden.
That's summer in Sweden. Oh, hi, Kristen. We've got some friends.
Yeah. Hello.
All right.
Alrighty. So let's jump into. So the natural question is, an assistant in the Dynamics Business Central space is peculiar and strange, and what's the story with that? So let's start with the basics on that one. Of Venus is one of the folks who was nice enough to edit my first book. So she has been learning Business Central and joined Spare Brained Ideas earlier this year as a junior consultant, and very quickly realized that while there's absolutely lots to learn as a junior consultant, what I needed more than a trainee was I needed an assistant. And I was told that she was going to be my assistant from then forward until she felt otherwise was necessary. And that is not to say that you're not learning lots of things still about Business Central, because I use you all the time as a sounding board for someone who is brand new to BC. Come here, let me make sure I wrote this up correctly. So it is a little unusual for sure. But the thing about it is, I've worked with a lot of different solution centers, either as an independent, a subcontractor, working in the organizations. I've worked with a lot of partners, and a lot of partners, it's very easy in a budget analysis to look at the expense of someone who is a non-billable person and go, this is just an expense item. But the reality is that if you're a project manager, a consultative person, developer, or you're coordinating between multiple different roles, there's a great many operational tasks and organizational tasks that, while very critical and important to getting the job done, don't necessarily require your depth of skills. You know, you don't need to be a SQL certified person to set up an appointment between 8 different people in 6 time zones. That's that's a completely different deep skill set. And so what we found here, even though we're a little organization, is that there are many parts of the many hats that I wear as a small business entity. There are many different parts of what I do that don't specifically need to be doing those parts. It becomes very easy to say, okay, well, this is an area and an opportunity to have someone who can absolutely do all of these organizational steps for me. And can be of great assistance, great help in streamlining operations. And I think one of the things that is my personal favorite is every week we have a rundown of just what are the priorities in a given week. There's always more to do than time to do. And so there's this opportunity and almost forced self-realization sort of moment. A lot of people will talk about if you're going to, better yourself as a person, you have to take these moments of thinking about what's important to you. Having an assistant in that sense, every week and every morning, we also have moments of those self-reflection of what is potentially falling off the radar. What are the things that we need to take care of? What can't wait? Because there's always things that are urgent. And often there are things that are more, there's often more urgent things than there is time in a day to do them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it has been an interesting journey. This is the first time I've had anyone play that role. So it's been different. So I guess I've babbled for a moment or a few. Let me kick it over to you, AJ, for our first question.
Yeah, I think before we get into the thing of questions, it's definitely unusual in our space to have somebody in this role, right? So I think for various reasons, people are curious, they are bewildered, I think, and everything in between. Because is it a full-time job? Do you really need this? Is it something that even as you're explaining this today, Jeremy, I think in our conversation, one thing that hadn't come up before is, is this a permanent position, as in long term? Eventually, if Venus decides, she is moving on and moving in a different role, different organization, do you think you will have somebody else in Venus's place, or is this something where this is an opportunity for you to get your house in order and become better at what you do, and then eventually not need that position, right? I even kind of wonder out aloud. So, quick question there. Maybe I'll start with that. I know I was going to lead with some questions for Venus, but let me put that to you and come back. And Venus, I love those expressions. The facial expressions are awesome. This
yes,
is what I love.
Jeremy, when would you like to replace me?
Not. Nope. Keeping.
Nope. No. So no, that's well, I won't press you for an answer there, but Venus, I think. I know you're going to be here for a little bit, so why don't I start with some questions for you? I think one of the first ones that I have, and I think a lot of times when we hear the type of introduction that Jeremy's given, you came in as an associate consultant, as a consultant who was going to be learning Business Central, and then at some point, both of you saw fit that this is a better role for you would be as an executive assistant, right? This is where probably I think Jeremy needed more help, and you thought you could be better help. So, do you see this as a long-term career? Is this being an executive assistant? Is that a career that you think long-term you would find fulfilling, and this is where you'd like to be as a career choice? Do you see this as a stepping stone? As Jeremy said, through this position, you're also learning a lot about product. You're learning about managing too, right? You're learning from somebody who is an excellent manager, and you've got your own ideas. Does this lead to the boss queen position as it builds? Where does this go?
One question at a time. One question at a. There are like 10 so far. So
I know. I'm really bad at compartmentalizing my questions. So maybe when I have an assistant, I'll be better at organizing them. How about that?
Oh yeah, trust me. It started when, like Jeremy said, I was hired as a junior consultant, and then I saw how much he needed management in his schedule specifically, and other parts in general. So I just put my foot down, dude. You don't have a choice.
We're just gonna pretend like Jeremy's not here. We're just gonna talk like Jeremy's not here. Great.
Sure.
If I get wrong, correct me. I'm more than happy to be corrected. Oh, where is he?
Love it.
Come on, don't be left out, boss. It was a very rocky road at the beginning, to be honest. It took a lot of effort from both sides to establish a level of trust where I know, for example, that if when he says like this, today I'm working from home, I know how to arrange everything for him to work at home. We got to a point from working 7 days a week to now he has a day off, a day and a half off, and no work after hours as much as we can. So I take full pride in that. Do I see this as a long-term career? Being an executive assistant, especially in this industry, allows you to be knowledgeable and opens the door of knowledge for all aspects. Someone once said BC is it's a bottomless barrel. Well, I, as an executive assistant, I swim in that barrel any way, any direction I want. I can lean towards consultative or dev. I know a bit of dev information here and there. I listen to conversations. I read emails. I have built a little bit of knowledge in so many aspects. So if I say like, oh, DevOps, oh yeah, I know what DevOps are. That is, I know pipelines. Now I know because if you remember in the EMEA, there was a lecture that Christoph and Kristen had done, devs versus consultants. I'm the guy in between. And it's liberating if you want to look at it from my point of view. Personally, I love working as an executive assistant. It gives me the space in my brain to get my brain out. I have Jeremy has been well, the company in general, Jeremy in specific, has been extremely what's the word I'm looking for? They were very nice to me. Every time I asked for a whiteboard, I got one. Now I got to a point where the only whiteboard I have missing is the ceiling. I am not kidding. I have 3 whiteboards in my room and paperboard, blackboard, bulletin board, you name it. If you like organizing stuff, if you like having stuff under control, yes, an executive assistant is a very good job. To have an executive assistant, get someone who can understand you and someone you can understand. Because without trust, this cannot work properly.
That's a pretty important point, right? Because you have access to Jeremy's emails, no doubt, the ability to send on his behalf, to receive. I think there's definitely a level of trust that has to be there. That on both sides. Yeah.
Yes. Jeremy knows that even though I have access to all his work emails, I know for a fact that if an email has something in the title that has NDA that I am not allowed to read, I just put it on the side, flag it, and give it to him. He knows that I have not read it. I keep an eye on the emails that he doesn't like to keep an eye on. All the commercials and whatnot, and the subscriptions, and those I don't want to call them spam emails, but they're sort of like waste of space.
Busy emails, right? Busy stuff. I mean, I think that's what happens with my inbox too. When I read my emails in the morning, my first read is from people that I know, and I just skip over everything else. The second is things that are supposedly from Microsoft or a service that I use that may be about an update, a change, a notification. And then the last are what are truly spam, and that's only to move them to archive. And so I think I definitely understand that a little bit. By the way, on my bingo card, I'm going to take off NDA because that was a question I was going to ask about later. How do you handle NDA type of emails? Because sometimes those NDAs extend out to everybody in the organization, or in the MVP sense, they extend out just to Jeremy. So you answered that, and I'm checking that off of my my questions.
There's a follow-up to that.
For you. Sure,
Yeah.
go for it.
Even though I have signed an NDA through my contract with the company, I'm already under NDA, but some companies, some clients, or even Microsoft, the MVP emails, they are person-specific.
Mm-hmm.
They are meant for Jeremy and his NDA. So I don't have authority to read them. So I never read them. I have created a folder for MVP emails.
If anyone from the MVP program is watching, there's an entirely separate mailbox with no permissions for that one because it's so strict.
There you go. One other question that comes up, I think, related to this, because I asked you a whole lot of questions at once, Venus, is I think from a long-term perspective, do you think you would like to continue as an executive admin? Is this something that you see as a career, Is this something that you build upon and you'd like to eventually, move in a different direction and, maybe help train the next person? And I ask this because let me give you a little bit of perspective. There was a book that I was reading a while ago. It's one of the books that I've just, in many ways, has shaped my outlook on people and their choices of careers and what they see as progression, what they see as rewarding. It's called Empowering Yourself. It's by Harvey Coleman. And in that, he talks about sometimes people look at an individual and say, oh, this person is a rising star. Oh, this person is stagnating. It's not necessarily that. And I'm paraphrasing what he talks about there. It's everybody has a desire to get to a certain point, and then they have priorities, and they decide when they want to get off that career bus or where that career bus takes them. And I think it's so there isn't a I guess I'll kind of leave it there and leave you to answer. Just how do you feel personally, Venus? This is not, I think you're not speaking for the world of executive assistants, but how do you personally look at this? What's your outlook on it?
Personally, like I said, I love my job, and not because he's here. I say it in front of him and behind his back. I love my job. I'm someone who woke up yesterday at 7 a.m. to come to work because I had a bit left to do that I needed to put before Monday morning. I was like, yes, I enjoy my job. And for me personally, I believe any job, no matter what, because I worked in several various jobs before this, it's a job. You either give 100% or you don't do it at all. And from my future perspective, wherever SBI wants me, I'm gonna be in SBI. I've enjoyed my journey so far, and I would want to see where we're going.
I love that answer because I think that even though this wasn't the central topic of our discussion or a topic of our discussion, this speaks to why organizational culture matters when it comes to keeping folks in organizations. You often read people don't leave a job, people leave a bad manager. And because they are unhappy with the way they're treated, the way they're appreciated or not appreciated, the workplace culture, all of those things are so important in being able to retain somebody who's talent, right? I think the general word to use there is talent. So that speaks volumes about how you perceive SBI, and that I think Jeremy, the culture that's being created there. So that's great. Venus, another question, and this comes from an article that Jeremy posted right after Directions of Mia. This was, as I read through that article, I chuckled a little bit. I kind of, it made me raise my eyebrows a little bit. You kind of get upset that in 2022 we still have to have a conversation like this. But I think it's just a wide spectrum of emotions, right? In that sometimes people will see the two of you and assume there is more to the relationship than meets the eye, and not necessarily in a professional sense. What does, and I think there's both two ways of looking at it. One, I think it diminishes somebody's profession and professionalism, but in some ways, the emotions that perhaps that Jeremy feels, he was able to share. How is that perspective for you? How do you take when somebody says that? They may not necessarily think that they mean that in a bad way, or maybe they do. I don't know, right? So just talk through that, because that was you never think in many years that after a conference in a recap, that's a topic that's going to be broached. But clearly it happened often enough that it had to be, right?
In this year, we have attended 3 conferences, and within 3 conferences, various people had the idea that Jeremy and I are married. In a sense, yes, we are. I am his work wife. He trusts me with 8 hours of his day on a daily basis. I manage at 8 hours of his day minimum. When you get with your assistant, whoever they are, when you get to a certain level of communication, it turns into from verbal to you can understand each other. There was an incident a few days ago where he needed a cup of tea, and I was like, and I knew what tea he wanted. He's just like, be crazy, go make something. It's the level of sync that you might have with someone, a communication, proper communication between you and your partner, so to speak, because your assistant, it's not a demotion. Being an executive assistant is not a demotion. I now have a finger in every pie. Being a junior consultant, I didn't have that.
Yeah.
I don't think it as a demotion, but what made it really funny is the fact that I didn't get offended by it, but I thought it was a joke because personally, I don't see life as other people do. People thought, oh, she's his wife. Oh, this is how she got her job. Or whenever someone says executive assistant, oh, sleeping together. I'm sorry, am I allowed to say that? Anyway, but people don't see, like, unless you have an assistant, you cannot see the importance of an assistant. For me, I laughed at the notion that people thought we are together because most people would think it's degrading to me or some sort, like not evaluating my efforts in what I do properly. I don't see it. I see it as a joke, and I think Jeremy and I relationship is far more. We sass in this in a way that a joke, we know the limit, we know the filters, and we know how to talk with each other without having that barrier. Oh, what is she gonna think now? Oh, did I say something he didn't? What did I even know? Like, those kind of things don't happen. When it comes to people, how they view me, I would like my work to speak for me. A couple of years ago, no one knew about me. Now I am a co-editor in a book. My
Yeah.
work will speak for me.
That is
And
true.
one day, someone will say, "Oh, I was wrong about her." That's enough for me.
That's good. I like that attitude. I like how your outlook on things, and I think you shrugging it off says a lot about you and your level of confidence. I'm part of a few different associations, and one of those, and most associations will have roles typically like a president, a vice president, a secretary, a treasurer, and so on. And recently, somebody in that association talked about how maybe we should consider changing the title secretary because some people find it degrading, and that was very awakening for me because I never thought of it that way. I mean, I kind of looked at it as a in every association that I've been a part of, at the student level or as a professional, usually after the president, the person with the most authority, the most knowledge about the organization, and so on, tends to be the secretary. In fact, unfortunately, that's also the most uh, overworked position because so much work flows through them, and which isn't very different, I think, than your role and kind of where you are in the organization. I think you have a tremendous amount of access as a result of that role, and I like how you present that over time. People are going to see the value that you bring to the table, right? And recognize you for the strengths that you bring to the table. And I think that's fantastic. Yeah. So those were some very, I think, insightful answers. I appreciate it. The last thing I probably is, what do you think an executive assistant needs to know about the executive they're working with? You talked about trust, right? That was very important. Besides trust, is there a specific type of thing that you look for if you're going through an interview? You had an unusual situation, I think, in that Jeremy and you had already gone through an interview process, right? And there was the organizational fit. Then it was just a role change. But if somebody is hiring for this role, what should they look at, and then what do you look for in your role? What makes a good fit?
Um, I think, in my view, the perfect fit for an executive assistant is someone you are comfortable being around, someone who understands your sense of humor, understands your ethics and morals in work, how you perform your work, and how you like your day to go forward. They need to understand that if I make you a cup of tea, it's not an insult to me. It's just me preventing you from breaking your chain of thoughts to go make yourself a cup of tea. My job is to make your job easier. My job is to make your job go smoothly. My job is to prevent you from getting a heart attack from the amount of stress you get from work. And the best way to look for that, experience can be gained through work. No one is born, no one, when they're born, knows everything. Experience can be learned through work. knowledge can, all you need is someone who knows the industry you're working in, what you need from them to do.
Yeah.
There, um, I don't know
No,
if
go
that
ahead.
answers your
It
questions,
does. It
but
does. As you answered that, I thought about. I'm a huge Formula One fan. It's anybody who can see behind me, or if you just like look around my office, every wall's a little bit of a bit of a shrine to Formula One. And 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, his physiotherapist and assistant. She's a lady from New Zealand. I think her name's Angie. I forget her last name. But there was a few years ago when she suddenly jumped into the limelight because somebody noticed there's this one person who's always by Lewis's side, and she's often carrying his umbrella, carrying his stuff, holding up the umbrella as he's walking down. I think for a little while there were a lot of comments around, why isn't Lewis holding the umbrella for her? Why does he have her carry heavy bags? So she spoke up and she answered. One, she's a physiotherapist. She's also, she trains and she's very strong. She's able to do those. And two, just that's a job I signed up for. In her way, she again looks at it as Lewis is about to get in the car and drive at how many hundreds of miles an hour, and hit turns at however many G's. And there's a tremendous amount of stress and preparation that needs to happen once he gets in the car. And leading up to that effort, he needs a clarity of mind to be able to do his job well. And her job is to help him do his job well. And that's part of it. And if that means holding up an umbrella, that's not sexist, that's not a reflection of that relationship outside of the workplace. It is
it's
in
not
that
a demotion if I help you.
Exactly. And I think people just there's a little bit of, chivalry. I come from an old school background. I value chivalry, but I think there's a place where that aspect needs to leave the room, and we look at it truly as professionals, irrespective of whether somebody's a man or a woman, and along those lines. So I appreciate it. I know we've left Jeremy a little bit on the side there. Jeremy, I know you're getting lonely. I have some questions for you as well.
To it. I work with him.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I'm going to build off of the last question a little bit too.
Sure.
I have never had an assistant before. It's something I had the idea in my head. It was always a someday sort of thing. But I admit, not having worked with an assistant before, there was a lot of needing to understand how I'm a read the manual kind of guy. Like when I was a child and I would rent video games from stores where you'd bring home the cartridge, dating myself on that one. When you would do that, I was the kid who would ask them for the instruction book, and all my friends would be button mashing. I'd be reading the instructions. So I read the instructions for everything. Drives everyone a little nuts. Since there aren't instructions for executive assistants, I went okie dokie, and I read 5 different books by executive assistants to go, what made that relationship useful and valuable and meaningful, and made sure it was a really good, productive result. And there were a few different aspects. One is that you need to open up in a big way to your executive assistant. There's a quote I was trying to find the source of that is along the lines of, trust is something that you pretend to have until you actually do. And you very much need to have that when you're bringing someone into your world, because what you really want is you want to have an assistant who understands what are your objectives, not the noise of your day-to-day, your week-to-week. What are your bigger picture objectives? What are the things that, if don't get tended to, will burn things down? Because after all, a fantastic race car driver, if someone's not changed the oil in the car, there's going to be a problem. So even little things can cause huge catastrophes. So you need to have someone who understands the bigger picture, but also can keep a sense of urgency and priority. And so in finding a good right fit and building that relationship and everything, the person that you're going to choose to try to trust, you need to be able to give them enough of an understanding of what's really important to you, so that when you're freaking out and going, I have so much to do this week, they can go, yes, but what are the things that you need to prioritize this week? There are these 3 urgent things, but then the rest of these are not in your top 3 priority. They need to wait.
Urgent versus important, right? I think we talk about that a lot during times in skill management. Yep.
Yep, absolutely. So, from that perspective of, I would say, if you to call back an earlier question of, how do you find a good fit, is to open up and try to give enough of a foundation of what's important to you, and then present that person with, what would you do in this circumstance based on what you know of what I would do in this circumstance, and try to develop that rapport and knowledge, and know that you're not going to get it right a few times.
You brought up a couple of really interesting things. I'll lead with where you ended. Understanding that there will be mistakes made, especially as we as an organization start to hire out of college talent for some roles, and we're trying to build a part of the organization with younger talent. We know there will be mistakes made, right? And when we realize that we're going to have a greater tolerance for mistakes, greater tolerance for people taking longer to do something than an experienced person does, and so on. So that is, I think, not just a something that we need to have in mind for that role, but across the organization. You touched on trust and how you have to feign trust until it truly exists. Speaking for myself, and this is something that really annoys some of, I think, my spouse and some of the people who are closest to me, that I have this trust but verify mentality. So somebody will say there's a dozen eggs in that box. I'll say yes. And depending on how well I know them and how much it annoys them, I may go count those when they're looking or when they're not looking. Right. So the amount of trust I have for you is probably by, if I don't count in front of you, then I respect you a lot and I don't want to do it. But it takes a while before I will trust you that there's really 12 eggs in that box. I think there's another concern that I have, and some of these really directly affect the ability of the other person to perform or their effectiveness, right? The other is, if somebody is writing an email on my behalf or is responding on my behalf, in many ways they are acting as my voice. And I'm very conscious about that image that needs to be portrayed, right? There's a certain image that everybody wants to portray. And you don't want somebody to speak on your behalf and say things in your voice, even if they're not writing from your email inbox, just representing you. And then this happens at both the executive assistant position and really anybody in your organization. How does that come across? The third is, and this is one place where I think in our organization at times I've found that things have gotten slowed down. And this is me taking ownership for some places where, I bring weakness to our team. And that is, if it's marketing type content, I'd like to exercise editorial control to some extent. And so they'll send me some stuff to look at and read. And depending on how long it is, it may not get reviewed for a week and a half. And now we're missing on times that opportunity to hit that thing while it was hot, strike while it's hot type of thing, right? So we were losing momentum there. And, it's taken a lot of effort on my part to stop being the bottleneck, to tell myself that in some cases it's okay if what goes out is less than perfect. And it's better to get it out there and then try to correct it. Venus, I think I saw the hand coming up a little bit. Speak away.
Well, I was going to jump in with the meanest thing Venus has ever said to me is, boss, you're very good at what you do, which means that you're always going to be frustrated because other people will do less than you can.
I was going to... It's true. It's true. But I was gonna comment on the what AJ said. You said something about not having the right time to read everything, and also you need someone to be able to say no for you. I want a meeting. No. He's busy. In hindsight, is something I sometimes clients don't like it because they're not speaking to the person they hired, which is Jeremy. They're speaking to his assistant, which is for them is less. But what they don't know is you're speaking to me only because he's doing something else. He doesn't have the time. And I said no for this meeting because he doesn't have the time. And I'm going to generalize this, and I'm very sorry for all of you MVPs, but you guys have a problem saying no. Can I have a meeting? Yes. Can I? Yes. No, you don't have the time. You work 40 hours a week. Jeremy, last month he worked 300 hours in the month. That's an obscene amount of number. That is a crime. You and it's
In the U.S., it's an
frankly
average.
an assist. Frankly, it's an assistant in this industry is something that is long needed for.
You know, you hit up another item on my bingo card. I'm just going to keep calling
Yes,
it
you
bingo
do,
card. It's like a
Kristen.
little, you know, it's. I just had a few like bullet points. So one of those was, how do customers deal? No, we don't. I love it, Kristen. You know, how do we handle, or how do your clients handle the loss of access, Jeremy? I think, how do they perceive it? And as a answer that, and then I'll ask a follow up. I've gotten into this habit of asking 3 questions at once. Let's try something different for a change.
Yeah, okay. We'll do bite size. The short answer is it's not super welcome. Especially if it's a long-standing client that you do like a whole lot, and you're used to having a level of access for this person that you can get me at any time. I'll respond at any time. You're important to me. That is very valued. And to even feel that is a loss can be a real cold bath of water, even though, I do a lot of development work. I do a lot of consultative work. I have clients I've worked with for a long time that, can just hit me up. Hey, can you do this thing real quick? And sometimes, I have the capacity to that day do that development effort. But, once it got into the flow of I need to really have my plans, there's definitely been a sense from everybody that I'm less accessible, that I'm slower at responding. And it's a little rough because if you were to take the same requirement through a lot of organizations, there'd be a needs analysis, there'd be a specification process sign off, there would be a lot of operational steps that would take a few days to get through normally. And that's a pretty common way to do things. It's honestly the right way to do things for accountability and track record. So the sense that it slows things down depends a lot on what the process is currently. So if someone is used to the virtual equivalent of just walking into the room and asking a question whenever they want, they will feel shut out. And that is a little bit hard. Separately, we also have the knowledge level. They know that I know the product in depth and I'm going to be very thorough and thoughtful and all that sort of stuff. Which means that also sometimes people don't take answers that aren't from me as seriously as they would take them from me.
Checking one other thing off of the bingo card. There you go. So that does happen. Does that change your period? Is there more of a? Do they wait for an answer for you? Is there asking it a second time? And how do you overcome that? Or is it something you can even overcome? Or is that just one of those things that you say, it's just something I have to deal with, and it's not going to change?
I think if everyone's happy with how things are working, then there's no real significant pushback. If, however, you've found yourself in a situation where someone isn't really happy with the results that they're getting, they're more inclined to push back, whether that be, a project that is slowed down, whether that be, something is beyond the budget that they were expecting, or out beyond the timeline of how quickly they were expecting a response. There's the natural human desire to want to push back and go, can I get an answer I like better? And when you add someone else into the equation, like having an assistant, there's the natural, there's an opportunity to push back. Maybe I need an answer from the real person. Wow. Oftentimes the answers that come from V are because she's walked into my office and said, okay, I've got 3 quick questions we can knock out real quick so you don't have to look your email. Can I give answers to this? And in 45 seconds, I've answered them and I can go right back to what I'm doing. And now she can go right up the nicer versions of it, the more careful branded, polite, all that sort of thing, with details, attachments, links, all the various things that instead of taking me the 15, 20 minutes to give that answer, I can answer in 45 seconds. That doesn't always resonate with people still anyways. We can wonder at the question of, is it the assistant factor? Is it the MVP, non-MVP factor? We can wonder at all those questions. I don't think, because we at our conference we were chatting about, is there the gender aspect to an assistant factor as well? Because Venus is a woman, is the answer taken less seriously? And I would say typically my experience so far is women are the ones who are pushing back more against Venus than men. Most of the guys are taking the answers.
Yeah, I don't know if I brought it up to you. The reason I'd even ask that question is there was an article I'd read about it where somebody had basically changed the name with which they were responding, and they thought they saw, and that's anecdotal evidence, right? It's not scientific. It wasn't done against a sample size. It was anecdotal, and it yielded different results from them. I think a Venus versus Victor type of conversation, and does that affect? The other part was phone access. So I'll give you the example of an attorney that we are family friends with. As his practice grew, what he started to do is when he comes into his office, he gives his personal assistant his cell phone. He has another cell phone that's reserved for family use. So his wife and his kids are calling and so on. They can call him, but pretty much limits access to everybody else. Is that something you have done? Is that something you do? What are your thoughts on it as somebody who has an executive assistant? How is that? How does that work?
I would say in our modern wonderful age that it tends to be less about phone access than it tends to be the Teams versus email. Me is managing my email for me and all that wonderful stuff. So it's a bit of like, can I reach them on Teams and get an answer I like better? That's, I like being able to have that direct contact. So I don't think that because of the way I've worked over the past several years, there's less of a sense of I should be able to just pick up a phone and call him. It tends to be I would say if you're considering moving to an assistant, try to change your workflow to not give those instant answers before you add an assistant into the equation, so they're not taking heat for something. We're all busy folks, and we tend to be very trying to get something done in meetings, all that sort of thing. Practice the pause of, I'm not available for you right now, but I will be as soon as I'm done with this thing. Practice that pause, and it becomes easier to introduce an external party. You can go, ooh, he's tied up this morning on pretty urgent things. Can he call you right after lunch? It becomes easier, and then the assistant doesn't take the heat for your saying, no, I don't want to talk to them this morning.
So two things. These are meant to be a paired question. So what is a formal title, Venus, that you have at the organization? And two, how would, and this could be either you or Jeremy who answers this, what is a job description in 3 to 5 bullet points for kind of what you do?
Ooh.
But you had the spot there, didn't
I? My title.
We're currently sorting that out.
Yes, I'm debating between cute executive assistant or communication manager.
Just for fun reference, we're in the process of getting all like union negotiated and getting under good contracts here in Sweden and everything like that. And they have some very particular requirements of titles and things like that. So we're sorting that out, but to meet union requirements rather than descriptive.
A title is just a word. You are who, like your job. If you love your job, it doesn't matter what it's called.
No, that's fair. But I'm trying to figure out, right? So what is a good effective title? I'm trying to see perceptions. Kristen, I know you've participated in chat. I'd love to hear what title I think Crystal Bailey has in your organization too. And I only call her out by name because you mentioned her by name in your chat.
For fun reference too, I'm in the same camp. Some people, titles are extremely important. I only have CEO at Spare Brain Ideas because that's the translation of the legal name for the title in Swedish law about how the organization is structured. In the past, I've absolutely had business cards I handed people that would say, CEO, but I've also had at the same time, wait, that's not the current one. I would have it say janitor because that would also be true.
Yep. That's a very good point. I think in so many ways, titles are for external consumption. I think, right? It's sometimes you put a title in the card so that somebody on the other side understands what your role in the organization is and why or who they should be talking to. We've had I'm a partner in another organization, and the CEO there, he often talks about how he's the head janitor and everything in between type of stuff. And yeah, the dishwasher, I think he's used a few different things in there for good effect. Because really, I think within an organization, especially smaller organizations like we are, boutique ones, we all wear a lot of different hats, as we should.
I'm going to actually have V bow out. She had an appointment she's got to go catch. So I'm going to drop her on out. But thank you very much for joining to answer
Thank you so much
your
Thank
for
you,
questions.
having me. I hope I helped. Thank you so much.
You did. Very insightful answers.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
So, Jeremy, remind me, how much time do we have? Do we have another 13 minutes or do we have a little bit longer? And then I'll kind of pick out a few questions because as we answer two, I get some extra questions that come in on the other side of my mind.
Well, let's see. What are we looking at on our pile so far? We've got probably about 10 more, I'm guessing.
No, actually, you'd be surprised. I think right now I've got about 4 or 5 more, but those can lead to some more, right? And so if we've got 13, then I kind of tailor them accordingly. Okay. Are we looking at the end of the bottom of the hour?
We can go a little bit longer than 12 minutes. We booked an hour for the stream, but if we go a little bit longer, that's fine too. So
all right, so I'll try not to take up too much. We talked about kind of the job title and job description. Just building off of that, I think let's talk a little bit about the dollars and cents or euros and cents concept of it a little bit without getting into specifics. And I'll there's one aspect of it is you mentioned Sweden and the laws there, so maybe let me start there. Okay. Are there specific incentives in working in an environment like Sweden? I think the European job marketplace and the laws there are a little bit different and probably more supportive of the workforce than U.S. laws are, right? Are there incentives in place to have that make it more affordable for you to have somebody in an executive assistant role, as opposed to, are there subsidies in place? Are there something like that made it more affordable for you to hire somebody in an administrative role? Because in a small business, in a boutique, that's one of the challenges, right? Every role you have to figure out, how do you justify your existence? How do you, I mean, if it's not a revenue generating role, then there's a lot of eyeballs that are on that role. And if it's something that,
well, let's see. For starters, Sweden does have some programs for, new starting companies or someone coming into a different career path and that sort of thing. So there are some small incentives there. I don't think they're significant enough that would have made the difference to whether or not we were going to hire. They help, but they only vary a little bit. And since I have worked in the U.S. space as well as a small business owner, I kind of have the perspective on that. And I would say from a market position, there's not a significant difference there. However, there are a few different pieces. First of all, from a justification of the cost factor. The way I would approach this, if you're looking at should I have an assistant or not, or should some of the people at my organization have an assistant to help them do their role, is what amount of time are they spending on things that are not specific to them, but have value? And it's a little tricky to quantify those value statements for sure. But say, for example, you're working with, as a subcontractor, working with other partner organizations, and every week you have to enter time into their system and it takes you a couple of hours. Well, there's 2 hours of your potential billable time or productive time, however your organization does things. What you have to do is you have to do an analysis of how much of my current work week is spent on things that don't have to be me and therefore are costing me money. And if they're costing you enough to warrant even a part-time position, odds are pretty good you're missing enough opportunities that it probably would warrant a full-time position. The other aspect to that that we were alluding to in some of our earlier chats on this topic is full-time versus part-time, but also internal versus virtual.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I wanted to bring that up as well, because there are some important aspects of that. Many of the organizations that I work with, the NDAs or subcontracting agreements or various other things like that, provide organizational umbrella agreements. However, if you are using a virtual private assistant outside of your organizational walls, they have a significant access to your data, to your knowledge, and everything like that. And that is technically a subcontracting arrangement. And so many times, your agreements will require you to, in writing, formally acknowledge and tell every one of the people you have those agreements and NDA agreements with that you have an external third-party organization working with the content. When I looked at, do I want to go virtual assistant or full-time internal, that was absolutely a consideration of, I didn't want to have the conversations with all of my customers of, I've located, maybe it's a virtual assistant here in Sweden. Okay, that's not too bad. But, what's the credibility trust factor of, I found a great virtual private assistant in, Thailand. Like, they might do a great job, but that is a potential big external access to critical systems. So there's definitely some consideration of, you might pay more for having an internal person, but it may also benefit you from the trust factor and also some of the agreements and contracts that you have in place.
So a couple of other interesting things on this topic, right? A lot of the questions I have kind of remain very similar themes. Very short, is the person in this role, do you see them primarily as your assistant? I imagine that's the case. Or is there also value to them being seen as the organization's assistant? And pros, cons, maybe talk to me as little or as much as you want to on this particular topic.
Sure. So the way I would break that down is, if you didn't have an assistant, would you be the person doing it? If all else fails and you didn't have a person in that role, would it fall on you to do that thing? Then it falls into the purview of your assistant's responsibilities. However, if it's something that assists with the entire organization that you wouldn't do, you delegate that to someone else normally, then you have to be a little more conscientious and careful of, if you ask an assistant to take those duties and responsibilities, it may be fine because they have the operational capacity, but you are reducing their capacity for the things that are important about what you do versus organizational. So if you do things like that, I would say it would be, keep track of how much of their time they're spending on what you would consider to be organizational versus actually the person that they're assisting. If it's that person's work that they're accelerating, that they're boosting, then they're still fulfilling that assistant mission. If it's the organization's work that they're boosting, then it's organizational. I would have them absolutely break down that time consumption, because what you could find is that you start getting to the point where you have 80% organizational consumption of your assistant. And when you're starting to cruise towards that, you're now reducing their ability to help you as the person. And that indicates that you actually do need an organizational admin, an office administrator, a team administrator, however you title that role, but you would need someone then in that organizational role. I do that a lot internally. Even though we're a small company, I say, keep track of how your time is spent. If it's not towards the mission. It's just maintenance operations and that sort of thing. Keep track of it so that way we can understand what's the cost benefit. We have a little office. Is it worth us, doing a half-hour cleanup work on the space each week, or should we pay a cleaning company? Those are the same sort of cost benefit things. So I would say if you hire someone, keep good track of how they split their time between organizational versus you things. If the organization's taking too much, they're not going to have as a person, your mission at heart. And that's the point of
Good.
this system.
I like that mission versus, yep. So another question. This comes from, I believe your primary, you still bill a lot of your time, correct? In your role, you're still billable. And so I've come from that background as well. And I think if you come from that background, you realize, mentally, at least for me, for most of my career, I found the value that I bring to the organizations I've been at is largely tied to the revenue I can generate in my mind, whether somebody said it or not. And I've strived to be more billable. When it became a pre-sale role, even though it wasn't directly billable, we still calculated those hours and they resulted in net revenue when we sold deals. Now, I think in the role that I'm in today, it's purely administrative. I work on the business and no longer in the business, and I no longer generate revenue. So individually, one of the struggles that I have is I know for so many ways I can justify that needing an assistant, but I cannot make the case to myself that as somebody who's already an administrative overhead type of role, that I need yet another administrative overhead role to free up. Any thoughts on that perspective?
That is always a challenge in a very heavily influenced by the billable hour concept industry. We are an industry where I have done fixed price estimates for customers and listened to them doing the math to try to go, how much per hour am I charging? And I'm like, that's not what I'm telling you. I'm telling you that it could take this much time, or it could take this much time. I'm eating the risk, and that's the benefit for me that I own that. And I think that's been a challenge for me with this industry in general. The last time I worked a full-time position, for example, they had, a bonus program. If you achieved a certain amount of billable hours, you're 75% billable. Anything over that, you get a bonus for this. Well, I went, all that does is it de-incentivizes you to focus on non-billable but high-value contributions to an organization. If your only objective as an organization is billable hours, you're going to do fantastically for a little while and then fall down. Because there are so many important, valuable things that have to happen to get business done, to get the customers done correctly, and get projects completed. There are always so many high value things, and it very much is hard to quantify the cost value of that, especially, I would say a good team to be talking to about that for their perspective is, marketing teams. I imagine have a really hard time quantifying success rates in marketing efforts. That's unless you are able to measure click-through rates. How do you measure the success of marketing? That's really hard.
And it takes a long time. I think a lot of times you notice with most marketing companies, the first 6 months to a year, they will say the cake is still baking and you will not realize value, and yet you continue to sink a lot of money. Let's switch gears. I want to be respectful of time, but these are some important questions as well.
Sure.
Looking specifically at the paradigm that you experienced, where Venus came in as a consultant and later switched into this role, compensation-wise, without getting into specifics, do you maintain similar compensation levels that you had for the original role? Because in a lot of organizations that, again, have come from a billable focus, revenue-generating employees are compensated at a much higher, pay scale than administrative roles. So talk to me a little bit through that. How was that? And is your situation necessarily mirror that of what other organizations may be, or do you feel you're in a bit of a different, exceptional situation that others need not worry about or mirror?
I would say we'd be a hard case study to review against, partly because, V joined the company in a junior role where she was very much a trainee. And so our compensation was fairly low relative to industry standards for consultative people, because that's her perspective is that's a reasonable thing to do. I need to learn and prove that I'm worth more, which I respect absolutely. But honestly, she is at the moment, and probably going to continue to be for a good while, better compensated as an assistant because it is such a valued role in the things that she's doing. And that's probably going to continue to be the case for a while. Absolutely, if you're looking at it as a billable organization, we often compete for resources on salary. Or bonuses tied to billables and all that sort of thing. So there is always that perspective of, can you pay enough? With the amount of knowledge that she has with BC, could she probably go out and get a job that pays her twice as much at this point and do okay? Probably. But that gets into the heart of some of the challenges of, how do you keep good people? How do you validate someone is productively trying to contribute in meaningful ways to the results that you have? I've worked at organizations that people were fantastic billing, and that's all they cared about, and that's all they did. And, if you asked them for help with things, you weren't going to get it because it wasn't a billable hour. So you have to decide a little bit about your company culture to make the salary relatively meaningful in a way that compensates them based on your company culture. And be absolutely aware that your assistant in a dynamic space is going to be learning a lot of stuff that's in huge demand. So if you're not compensating them well enough that they're happy, they are absolutely going to get LinkedIn offers left, right, and center that could be real attractive. So definitely think about the cultural aspect and making sure that they're satisfied with their salary. I would say
I'll wind down with, I think, two questions / themes, and I'll let you decide how much detail you want to go in. I met you and Venus, I think, first at a conference, so fitting that I should ask the additional travel cost that incurs from having somebody in an administrative role every time you're traveling. There's tickets, hotel rooms, registration fees, and so on. Specifically with registration fees, one, are there any discounts that you've been able to realize by virtue of the fact that the person traveling with you is an assistant and isn't necessarily, a traditional attendee? Two, how has it been? Has that limited your ability to participate in certain conferences? Because every time you go, for obvious reasons, you would want your assistant there so that they can follow and provide and be there for all the things that you need. So talk me through that a little bit.
Okay. Well, I would say some of there's a few bits and bobs in there. There is no reduced rate for consultative newbies or assistants or anything like that. So it is absolutely full price, and, hotels and travel and all that sort of thing. But I would say for me personally, it's been extremely valuable to have that level of organization on the road. The carry your umbrellas for you sort of mindset, it does take a lot off the mind. And for the conferences that I've attended this year, I've been speaking at all of them. So there's, a lot of attention and focus that I need to put into being prepared for these events. And so not having to think about a lot of the logistics makes a huge difference. So I would say it's been worth it, but I imagine other people will probably not make the same calculations. And it was also really handy to I would say, again, a big part of what I want to have is I want an assistant for me in the space to be a long-term position. I want someone who is known to people in the industry that they can go, if I want to get something in front of Jeremy quick, because this is a big, important thing, I know his assistant. And so by bringing my assistant to those events, that's also giving the opportunity for people to get to know her. And for those who don't know, I voluntold her to help coordinate with Christoph to set up one of the events around Directions EMEA, the Beer and R, that was attended by quite a number of people.
Very nicely organized.
And that would have absolutely not been possible. That's not anything I would have attempted to try to do. So it was phenomenal to have that that assistance on the road, even down to things like, I'm going to be speaking in half an hour. Can you go grab me a cup of tea while I make sure the slide deck is finalized?
Yeah.
So,
all right. So final question / theme, perception. And this one's more about you. What are, how do you deal with the questions that come your way, or do you even get asked, oh, well, maybe Jeremy can afford this because Jeremy comes from a well-to-do background, right? Or is just kind of had the silver spoon and can afford that. But for most of us average folks, we can't. And that's really not a scenario that we can all strive for. Is there, do people ever ask you about your private jet and the helicopter land, the helipad and all that? Just talk me through a little bit of that. It sounds tongue in cheek, but I think where I'm trying to drive at is this something that the average boutique business executive can strive for, can realistically do? Do people think that once you've explained the value, or is there always still this perception that you're only able to do this because, and those because are factors outside of the direct financials of your business? You have affordability outside of your business that puts you in a position to do it.
Well, let's go with, for starters, there have absolutely been a couple of jokes here and there of, when are we booking the private jet? But they weren't meant maliciously. So it was very tongue in cheek and very taken as a joke, and no worries there. But I do think there is potentially that perception issue because of the fact that it's uncommon. So I hope more people watching this do go down the path of assistance. I think it's a good thing. And then to answer the other question, I'm going to go a little bit personal. I actually grew up in poverty. There was a reliance on a lot of government assistance when I was growing up. We were lucky if we could afford a phone and hot water at the same time. And once in a rare while, I didn't have to help with carrying the groceries home from the grocery store because we didn't have a car. So it was definitely not a silver spoon sort of situation. And it's been, I'll go with a very long climb from that. I still have memories of school administrators taking me to go buy clothing. And I look back on that and go, how badly off was I that school staff would help with that? So there's definitely not a personal wealth factor. And for the partners and customers that work with us, they also know that we charge, frankly, probably too low of a rate, and that we're not, out there charging exorbitant rates to do what we do. It's just a matter of, for what I need to do, for all of the things that are important to me, I put enough of a value on having someone external to myself be a champion of the things that are important to me, even in the face of me going, I need to do this for this project. It's due on Thursday. I have someone who is going, yes, but what about this thing that you said you need to release by the end of the month, or you need to update by the end of the month? I haven't streamed a whole lot in the past several months. This is one of the first streams I've done from our new office. I haven't streamed a whole bunch, and I've been getting lots of pokes and nudges of, hey, admin, you said you wanted to do streams and podcasts and all these sorts of things, and you haven't done any of that in almost 6 months. So what's the story there? So I have someone external to me playing that squeaky wheel, and it's important enough to me that I find there's too much value in that, even if it occasionally comes with some jokes and japes and pokes about having something.
Well, congratulations in the new office. Usually this is a time where the host says thank you, but I would like a moment just to, I want to thank you, and I want to thank Venus for, one, continuing this conversation, because it was like many people, I too had a lot of questions about somebody in the SMB space having an executive assistant, somebody in a boutique organization having an executive assistant. And what I really appreciated in this conversation is that both you and Venus were very candid. I think very vulnerable, and you did not have. I think while what I really liked is in prep for this call, you didn't tell me the answers you were going to give, but I did ask, are some of these questions okay to ask? Are these off limits? And credit to both of you that there wasn't a question I wanted to ask that you said that was off limits. You could very well have done that, and it would be perfectly understandable. So I appreciate that, being vulnerable and authentic and candid. And this was great. It's great that others got to listen in, but even if this was an audience of zero and it was just the three of us in the room, I would have still felt the exact same thing. So I appreciate it. Thank you for making time to take these questions from me, and then for being willing to do this in front of a live audience. Right? No editing, no do-overs. We said what we said, and it's on the tape. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
There was a fantastic interview I just listened to over the weekend with Gail King from I think it's Good Morning America, maybe.
Okay.
They were chatting with her of like, you do everything live, and she's like, absolutely, I enjoy the experience of working without a net, because you have to say the things you mean, and you have to mean it the right way in that moment. And for me, I'm very candid and open about a lot of things, and not afraid to share those and whatnot. So I think these are all good questions, because I think that I'm hopeful that the takeaway for a lot of organizations is that there is high value in non-billable people. I've worked with people who provide non-billable assistance to partner organizations as office admins, as executive assistants, as documentation writers, any number of different roles within an organization that don't produce a bottom line plus marker. They are definitely a cost center, but it's high value. If you're, an organization that's looking at, well, maybe this might be helpful, look at hiring someone who is intentionally 50-50, half you help this one person because they have a lot on their plate that needs to be managed and a lot of pressures. And then the other half is, can they help with some of those organizational, and try that as a on purpose thing. And you might find, okay, well, they work better with it. They don't work well. It's not clicking. Great, transition them to that officey role and develop them that way. So I'm hopeful that there's a lot of organizations that do watch this and think, what can we do smarter? What can we do better? There are always priorities that get deprioritized that are still important. Having someone be that champion is such a good high value. You'll see the results of that. We're frantically trying to finish up the second book while I'm already crazily writing a third one to come out next year. And we're going to be doing some new classes and content and all that sort of stuff next year. And all of that's only possible because I have someone in-house who is going, okay, boss, you said you want to work on reviewing these 52 chapters in this book, and this is your deadline. This means you have to spend 2 hours every day here, and I've booked it all in your schedule. It wouldn't be possible otherwise, or I'd have to do what I did with the first book, which is tell everyone to go away for 30 days and then come back when I'm done writing. That isn't a very practical approach to doing business. So
I do really good cold readings, by the way, and I'm sensing that one of the books you're writing is a Business Central thriller about the project that almost didn't go live on time and on budget. Maybe it does, but there's a lot of twists and turns. It's a real page turner, right? Isn't that what that second book's about, or is that the third one?
Second book is going to be a little drier, a little more technical.
Right. Okay. I can't get the cold reads right on the internet sometimes. I guess if we're in person, it would work better. So.
Well, on the bright side, some people are going to enjoy. We are having some fun with prepping some things to release for the holidays as a surprise. So hopefully we'll be on track for all of that. It's been, I got some sass from Freddie at Microsoft of, it seems like you're like quiet, and then come out of nowhere with all sorts of things all at once. And it tends to be that way. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Jeremy. It was a real pleasure. Happy holidays, and yeah, this is great. And Venus is on the call anymore, but do thank her for me as well. And I had such a
Absolutely.
great time with this conversation.
All right. Thank you. And enjoy, everyone. If I don't stream before the holidays, happy holidays, everybody. Take care, everyone.